Welcome to another Cincinnati Sessions, a production of the University of Cincinnati Internal Medicine Residency. Today, why is it called Essential Hypertension, and what can that teach us about learning? We begin with the case. A 56-year-old man has the following blood pressures. 1 month ago, it was 156/96. 2 weeks ago, 162/92. And today, it's 166/94. He has no symptoms, and his physical exam and metabolic profiles are unremarkable. He is given the diagnosis of essential hypertension. Question: why is it called essential hypertension? Pause the video and try to answer this question for yourself. If you're next to someone, present this case and discuss together. After you try to answer the question, resume the video. Essential hypertension is defined as high blood pressure in which secondary causes such as renal vascular disease, renal failure, pheochromocytoma, and aldosteronism are not present. It's a heterogeneous disorder with different patients having different causal factors that lead to high blood pressure. But why is it called essential hypertension? Why essential? Well, the sphygmomanometer was invented by Samuel Siegfried Karl Ritter von Bosch in 1881, and so there was a period of time where we could measure blood pressure but couldn't do much about it. It turns out, at the turn of the last century, around 1900, when they were measuring blood pressures, they noted that people that had high blood pressure, often at autopsy, had significant atherosclerosis and narrowing of the arteries. And they felt that the hypertension was essential in patients like this because they had to have the higher pressure to drive blood throughout the body when the arteries were narrowed. But now we know they probably got the cart before the horse. It wasn't the narrowed arteries that led to the hypertension. It may have been the other way around. But this term essential has been applied to many different ways. Look at all the different things that are now essential, meaning idiopathic or primary, whatever definition you choose. Now, the interesting thing about this factoid is that you're probably going to remember it. And it's going to be easier to remember than, say, the connection between calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, and parathyroid hormone in hyperparathyroidism. And the reason is, at some point, you're likely to turn to a friend when you hear the word essential hypertension, and you're going to say, hey, do you know why it's called essential hypertension? And in the telling of that story will be the remembering of the fact. What we know about learning may have started with Hermann Ebbinghaus when he wrote a paper in 1885. And what Hermann tried to do was remember something and then counted how long it took him to forget it. And he found that after about a month, about 80% of what he learned was gone. And this has been termed the forgetting curve or the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. I know what you're thinking. You can't quote me a paper from 1885. Fine. This person thought the same thing. And there were 2 studies in addition to Ebbinghaus in the 20th century, and he did his own study and found the same decrement. We are built to forget. So if you think about the way memories forms, first you have incoming information like the sound of my voice or the feel of the seat underneath your chair. And this is sensory memory, and unattended information will be lost. But if you paid attention, like a phone number or a name, then you can put it into short-term memory. Unrehearsed information is lost, though, so you have to say it again. Say a name, say a phone number, say what I'm saying. Otherwise, if you don't, you'll lose it. But once you rehearse it, you encode it, you put it into long-term memory, although right there, some information may be lost. And then at some point, you're going to retrieve it, and then it comes back into short-term memory in which you rehearse again and then encode. And the whole process repeats itself. It's an active process. If you think about, well, when's the best time to remember something if I want to remember it long term? It turns out the optimal spacing gap depends on the test delay when you need the information. So if you want to remember something for 7 days, the best time to rehearse the information is on day 1. At 35 days, the best time to sort of re-see it again is around day 15. If you want to remember it 70 days from now, the best time is to do it about 20 days, 21 days. But if you want to remember for almost a year, the best time is around 75 days. However, this is why cramming feels so good, because look how well the performance is if it's just been a 7-day gap. Whereas here is the forgetting curve. Even the best performance only gets you up to the Ebbinghaus limit. So it's not very good to cram. It's counterintuitive. Cramming feels good because you do well on the test, but come back in a year and you can't remember much. You want some proof of that? Well, here's one of my favorite studies from Ole Tinkat and his group, where he gave attending physicians their basic science tests from medical school years after they had actually studied and taken those tests. And at about 100 months, attendings only got about 25% of the questions right. And if you go out to 300 months, it's worse than chance level. So if we think about these 2 adult learning theories, the first is testing for learning. If you just study something, you'll get to the Ebbinghaus limit of about 20%. But you study a little bit more, you do a little bit better. It's not until you do retrieval practice, which is just test yourself, to really ask yourself, do I know this, that you do best? And it's important that you space this out. As I mentioned, the spacing gap, the longer you want to remember it, the more you have to rehearse, the longer the spacing gap has to be, so that you can turn the forgetting curve into the learning curve. So just like runners have to run in order to be great runners, learners have to learn in order to be great learners. You have to remember to remember. Which is why during these cases in the Cincinnati Sessions series, we've been asking active questions. Why is it called essential hypertension? Take a second to reflect on the point. Can you say the answer? And then we ask you questions for reflection, and we ask you to say it out loud. It is unlikely that if you cannot say the answer immediately after being presented the information, that you're going to be able to say it 3 days from now, or 3 weeks from now, or 3 years from now. So that's why we encourage you to be active in your learning, to say things out loud. So when you're studying, at some point, put away your class materials and write down or sketch out or say everything you know. And then check those words or those writings against the study material for accuracy, because retrieval practice works best when you can go back and check your materials for accuracy. Take as many practice tests as you can get your hands on. Be here in the retrieval space. If you don't have ready-made tests, make your own or make flashcards. Be active. And don't just recall words and definitions. Try to see the big picture. Try to recall the main ideas and how things are related or different from one another. The bottom line is learning is active. You have to remember to remember. If you're passively receiving, you're probably not going to be remembering things for long term. So some questions for reflection. What is the process of encoding memory from first step to last? What is the relationship between testing gap and memory performance? Why is it called essential hypertension? Why is it important to be able to answer these questions out loud now? Pause the video and try to answer these questions alone or with a friend. Try to say these answers out loud. Remembering requires you to remember. If you have to, rewind the video to find the answers. We appreciate that you have watched this Cincinnati session. Please check out the other videos in this series.